All right, welcome to another edition of Regenerative Inspiration, where we inspire, encourage, bring hope, talk about innovation, but also talk about stories of overcoming adversity. Today, our guest is Michael Hofer, and he is the CFO of Navajo Transitional Energy Company. And I had a great conversation with Michael. He's a fellow Titan 100 from Colorado. Had a great conversation, and he was elated to be on here. And I think he has so much great information to talk about. We're going to be talking about mergers and acquisitions. We're going to be talking about a whole lot of different things that I think you're going to want to join us on. So, Michael, introduce yourself a little bit, and thank you again for coming on.
Well, thanks a lot for organizing. It's great to be here on the podcast, and I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Right on. Well, I know that, you have been an early adopter in quite a few things. And I know early on, our first conversation, you said 1998, video teleconferencing, right? Or video teleconferencing that you got involved.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I have multiple university degrees, and for one of the degrees, I started with a master program and a thesis about video conferencing. And at that time, 1998, everybody was saying, do you really want to talk about this or write about it? This is really science fiction. Nobody is really gonna stop traveling and using video conferencing. And now you see everything is video conferencing. That was very exciting. And then later for the same program, for the dissertation I wrote about internet economics. And at that time, companies like Amazon were still small, only a bookshop, and not as huge as currently. And that was exciting. And then I jumped to IFRS and the international accounting frameworks, which was rather early when I started with that. And a couple of years, I jumped on the topic of artificial intelligence, went to MIT with a certificate. I'm also the AI project leader here at our company, the Navajo Transitional Energy Company. And it's just exciting, using all of those new developments and trying to figure out how we can best use it.
I love, you mentioned Amazon, just a book company, because I really enjoyed back in the day buying used books from Amazon. You buy something for like $2 or something, and then all of a sudden it would recommend all these different things. The recommendation engine was so good that I would end up with like 10, 15 books coming from all over the country, maybe world, I don't know, but it was so good. And I missed that part of Amazon, to be honest, because you get in there and get lost. I know people love to like listen to things, but I still like a good book in my hands. I read faster that way, I think. But talk about your overall like mindset of how have you been forward? Like, is there something special about you, or is there a way that you think that other people can learn about, forward thinking? Because you've been ahead of things, and I think I would love for that advice to those that are younger, or those that maybe have a little bit of stagnation in where their career is right now. I would love for them to hear about that thought process.
Yeah, sure. So one of the mantras that I keep telling myself, and I'm a really strong believer in it, is that there is always opportunity in life. We may not see it, and sometimes, especially when we are stressed out, we focus on one possibility in life, maybe a second option, but probably there are 3, 4, 5, 6, or even more options. And especially when you go into 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you start thinking, well, what if you started using this technology? What if you changed the process? What if you did this? And suddenly you open up your mind and you see other opportunities that, when you're stressed and you're just sitting in the office and trying to survive one meeting after the other, that's just, it limits sometimes yourself. So sometimes it's better to lean back and think about those opportunities. And it's already a couple of decades ago that I started really thinking like this: what is the opportunity? What is out there? What are the other using? And there is always a threat, right? Some people believe also with AI currently, well, we're all gonna lose the job, and it's a big threat. And there's always a threat, obviously, with everything that is new, but there's also an opportunity. And I try to focus in my life always on the opportunity. And initially, it is just let's see how it works. Let's see what the good news is. Let's see what the bad news is, and just try to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great advice. Looking forward for those opportunities is awesome, and I think so. I know a few people are probably saying, "Where's this accent from?" And that's a little bit of adversity we were talking about. Is that you know Salzburg, Austria, beautiful town. I visited many years ago. I have wanted to go back. The hometown of Mozart, right? Mozart chocolates at least are made there. I don't know if it's the
Yeah,
hometown,
exactly.
but tell me a little bit about what it took to go, from Austria and then move to the U.S. and what that transition was like, as especially as an executive. What was that like?
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of classical music. You mentioned Mozart already. By the way, Red Bull, that energy drink, is also from Salzburg, a global headquarters. So
We
it's
got wings.
little town, but a lot of big things. I had already a very successful career in Salzburg, Austria, and I became at a very young age a CFO in an international company called Ski Data. And I really enjoyed working there. But at some point, I was really thinking, there is a big world out there. And again, what are the options? What are the opportunities? What if I continued adding an international degree? I already had a PhD and an MBA from Vienna. But then I thought, well, what if I added a Master of Science in accounting degree from a US university, which I did with the Regis University actually here in Denver. And then what if I added a CPA? Would that help for my international career? And that's what I did. And I finished it as one of the best worldwide, in the top 37 out of more than 90,000 received the Elijah Watt Sells Award. So it was really me sitting in that small town of Salzburg in small Austria and just thinking and dreaming, what if, what are the options, what are the opportunities? And then I was actually contacted by an Austrian company, global Austrian company, Capstreificon, and they invested in North America and were looking for somebody who knows about mergers and acquisitions. And besides AI and strategy work, mergers and acquisitions is one of my specialties. I've worked on more than 30 M&A transactions in my life. And that was one of those really deciding moments where I said, okay, let's jump into it, move to the US, just try to figure it out how I like it. And then there was one big surprise, by the way. So I was hired to start in Washington, D.C., and then there were some process issues initially, and I had to go to Toronto, Canada. And I was in Mississauga for the first 6 months, which was a total surprise for me. But I think sometimes in life you just have to be flexible, you know. And in the end, I enjoyed Canada and Mississauga and especially Toronto quite a bit. And that's how I came to North America. And the fun thing is, initially I thought, well, maybe a year. Let's see how I like it. And at the end of the first year, I said, well, let's add another year. And now it's almost 15 years that I'm in North America. I'm a CFO, and usually I say we all have to plan. We all have to have our budget and forecasts. But life sometimes turns out very different than what you believe, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that you're not the normal CFO. Like I feel like most CFOs do not like any of that change that you just talked about. And that's why it's so interesting talking with you, especially I think, the viewpoints that you have on mergers and acquisitions is really important to a lot of companies. That there are roll-ups that are happening right now in the US and across the world. There are companies that are considering, hey, there's more people retiring out of the business where maybe their kids don't want the business and they're trying to figure out what to do next. What do they do with this legacy that they built that their kids don't want, And so can they just sell it? Does it fit in a roll up? Does it fit into something else? Like, I would love to hear your advice on that. And then from a standpoint of successful roll ups, what that looks like too, because, or maybe we'll jump into that after you answer the first one, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So mergers and acquisitions, what I see happening with many companies is that somebody approaches them and there is one opportunity how they can sell, or what they can buy, right? It depends a little bit whether it's a buy or a sell opportunity. But then people or many companies, and especially the smaller ones, jump on this one opportunity. I think what the best approach for mergers and acquisition is actually not start with M&A, but start with the company strategy and say, this is my vision that I have for the company. This is where I want to go. And hey, there is one tool how I can achieve this. There are multiple tools, right? And one of those tools, it's mergers and acquisitions. And then you have to compare mergers and acquisitions with partnerships, with self-development, if it's the acquisition of a product, with building your own subsidiary, if it's about geographic growth. So considering M&A only as one of the tools that you have in your whole strategy is an important element for M&A. And then the second biggest thing is that people get lost in the detail, right? You have a long to-do list with mergers and acquisitions. There's a marketing to-do list and due diligence, sales, HR, finance, legal, and so on, and IT integration, and now AI integration and whatnot. And people get lost in all of the details of mergers and acquisitions. And what was always helpful in my life in general, but also in mergers and acquisitions, is to think, what is the main goal I want to achieve with that activity? And for M&A, it's what is the investment thesis? And always when life gets difficult, and as I said before, life always, turns out different than what you think. And sometimes problems come up, and having a problem is not a problem, not solving it is one of my mottos. And that's when you have to go back to the big picture, also in M&A, and just think, okay, what do I want to achieve with that transaction? And always come back to that main idea. And that helps you not to get lost in the to-do lists.
I love it. Well, what about the culture overall? Like, how do you suggest that people look at merger and acquisitions, and how can they, make it more successful? Because there's some that aren't successful, and there's some that shouldn't have started in the first place. So any
Yeah.
thoughts around that?
A very good topic. So there's actually quite a big number that fails with mergers and acquisitions. And it's not only at the beginning that it fails, it's afterwards with the integration. And one of the big challenges that I see is that a bigger company buys a smaller company and just wants to roll out the big processes and the big tools to the smaller company. And that's sometimes maybe the best approach, but other times it's not, right? And I think in general, if you work also on global M&A, and I've worked on quite a few very complicated M&A transactions with many different cultures and companies in different countries. One of the things that was always helpful for me is to try to go with a view to the other company, to think, what can I learn from the other company? What works already well in the other company? And if it works well, don't change it, right? And I think that's one of the things that many companies just do wrong, because they take all of their processes, all of the tools, just throw it on the other target company, overrun them, want to change the culture of that company on day number one. And I think that's one of the biggest problems regarding culture. In an ideal M&A transaction, from my perspective, is really where you say you have one company and the other, and one culture and another culture, and you try to figure out what are the best parts of both of those culture, and then actually you create a different one, a third one.
I think that's great. I know that I was involved in a pretty large merger acquisition from a standpoint of production company, and we were brought on to come up with suggestions and ideas around how do we create a better culture through video across these two combating brands. And so I won't say who they were, but the one had a great culture, and the other one had been on the chopping block for about 6 or 7 years, and or I think 5 to 7 years, somewhere in there. And so they had been for sale, and like they're not really selling, and they're completely like customer service oriented over here. So tons of great culture, no culture, didn't like each other. how do you bring them together? And ultimately, we came up with a concept of these branch managers finding stories of people that they had helped in unique ways that were, influential in their environment. And then we could ultimately take those scenarios and like reward them with a surprise. And so we captured, these surprises on camera. And then that culture was like, I mean, those types of videos were just so heartwarming and like welcoming. And that just like, you know, per- it just percolated over to the other side. And the CEO actually, it's a multi-billion-dollar company. I don't remember how big it was, but it was a big company. Came up and said, "I cried watching your videos, and thank you so much for all the work that you've done to like help this come together." It was pretty cool. So I know how powerful it is to keep that culture though, and a lot of people overlook it, saying, you know, it's just numbers, and especially from the CFO standpoint, you're like, oh, I get rid of these numbers. I can get rid of these numbers. I can make it look better and make this more like, successful. But then all of a sudden it's not better in the long run because people aren't working together well, So I think that's such a great perspective that you have.
Yeah. I always considered the financials actually as a lagging indicator, what comes afterwards. If you want to improve something in a company, you change with processes and you think about teamwork, how you can refocus the team. This is actually a leading indicator, and the financials are just the output of that, right? And what you are saying is exactly what I see in some of the companies. They want to manage a company with the Excel sheet. But it's not the leading indicator, right? If you really want to change something, think about how your teams work together, what the focus is of your people, how you can motivate the people, how you can choose up life, that people are excited about going to work. And then you can talk about tools and processes, but those are the things actually to improve a company, not by looking just at the Excel sheet. Right?
So so schooling, I'm going to put you on the spot here. So schooling is much different, in my opinion, in Europe than it is in the U.S. And there's a lot of people, like a lot of people, that have moved away from public school systems, either for their kids in private or they're homeschooling and taking kind of control of how their child is learning through different. There's all sorts of programs, right? Can you talk about the differences that you've seen being raised in Europe, in the European school system, into the US? Can you talk about that? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but it's been definitely a conversational topic lately.
Sure. Um, since I completed university degrees both in the US and in Austria and the UK, by the way, I think I can best compare the approach at the university, and uh, and both have their advantages, and I really enjoyed both of those different approaches, and combining that is always the best approach. So one of the things with a thesis or a paper you have to write at a university in Austria is you have a specific topic, then you choose, let's say, 15 to 20 articles or books, and then you try to come up with a paper on the topic. It's a little bit theoretical, right? Very often not very applied. On the other hand, when I did my degrees here in the US, there's one textbook, you use one chapter of the textbook, you try to apply it, and then it's a very applied paper about the theory you have from that one textbook, right? And I enjoy both worlds, to be very honest. Sometimes I like going a little bit in digging into the research and being a little bit theoretical, talking about strategy, which is sometimes a little bit at a higher level. But at the same time, I'm a very operational guy. And whenever I finish my thoughts about strategy and the research, I always think, okay, how can I apply it in real life? And I would say the theory is probably more advanced and in the European culture and universities, but the applied version is very strong in the US. And you see this also with people coming out of universities and creating their own companies here in the US. In the US, way more than in Europe. So I would say it's two different approaches, a, a tendency of two different approaches, and ideally you have both.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. And I always love the fact when you're forced to like maybe take the other's side and then back up that argument, even though you're like maybe belief system is on this side. I feel like it comes a long way to understand like much broader on topic, especially social topics and things like that. Talk to me a little bit about Thrive. I know that's something that we had talked about, isn't it?
Can you repeat the question?
Talk to me about Thrive. Thrive Network.
The Thriver Network, yeah. So as you mentioned before, I'm the CFO of a big energy company, a Navajo transitional energy company. What I've started developing over the last 3 years is what I call now the Thrive Network. And it started with me being a diabetic type 1, and I wanted to, and rather successful, I manage it rather successfully. I have great blood sugar values. The long-term blood sugar value, the latest that I had was actually of a healthy person, not of a diabetic. And I started writing about it in one of the websites where I say, okay, how do I manage it, right? How do I combine a healthy diet with workouts, with mindfulness, and how do I combine everything together with advanced technology also here for diabetes management, like a CGM and insulin pumps and everything, and how to become successful. And I really wanted to motivate other people to say it's not surviving with diabetes, it's thriving with diabetes. This was really it is a very important topic for me in life. And I started with that, and I really liked it as more as a blog, but then I started writing books about it. And then I thought, well, I have a lot of experience in M&A, and business strategy and intercultural and global expansion and growth, and now with artificial intelligence. What if I created also a website about thriving in business, right? So I have thriving with being healthy and thriving with diabetes, thriving with business, and my website here is bymichaelhofer.com. And that's what I do there. I really give advice, and there's a lot of free stuff like blog posts and downloads and many other things, where it's really about how can you not only survive as a company, and as I said, how can you juice it up and really enjoy life and think about the future, and how can you thrive with business. That was the second one. And then recently, actually only a few months ago, I thought, over the decades, I've really started developing a very successful approach about how can you envision your future and how can you be successful beyond business, beyond your health, in general in life. And that's where I created the third website where I talk about thriving in life and how to achieve your goals and your dreams. And I call this now the Thrive Network because everything is about thriving in life. Thriving with a healthy life, with diabetes, thriving in business, and thriving in life in general. And it's one of my big goals, and I think about it every day, how I can get better and how I can live life more joyfully and more successfully. It's all about thriving in life, not just running from meeting to meeting and following your career and your to-do list. Life should be more than just doing that. Right?
That's 100% true. And I didn't know you had all those different websites. I knew a little bit about the Thrive Network on the diabetes side, but so what is the website? And I'll have it like down below here. But what are the website or websites that people can find that?
So the one for business is bymichaelhofer.com. The one about diabetes is healthydiabetes.com. And the third one is thrivebymichaelhofer.com. And if you go one of those websites, you have below also the links to the other ones, because it's really now an integrated approach that I developed. And as you can see, when I talk about it, it's very emotional for me, and I just enjoy doing it. It has become over the last 2-3 years something very important for me. I wrote more than 10 books in those areas, 3 M&A books, one for thriving and the other ones in diabetes management. Just this weekend, by the way, I published an online course about AI in finance, how to use artificial intelligence in finance. So I have also 3 courses that I offer there. And it's just, that combination of my professional life here at the Navajo Transitional Energy Company as a CFO and executive in a billion-dollar company, but then also this other part of my life that I call the Thrive Network and that I want to develop. Overall, it all should lead to a balanced life, where you focus on many things and not only on one.
I agree with that. So that's great. I don't know if there's ever balance, but there's like a lot of like I tend to think that it's a lot of energy in one area and then maybe you transition to another area and then to another area. I don't know. I've got 4 kids, so I feel like I don't really have a lot of balance, but it's okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And,
two of them
and
came
that's
in. Two of them
yeah,
came in during the podcast.
and that's very natural that this is happening, by the way, right? We all get lost in all of the topics that we have in all of our to-do lists
Yeah.
that we have in life. But I think it has become very important for me really to balance it, and to develop those life categories and work on all of them.
Yep. And then it gets all messed up. So you have to deal with that. So when I moved to Colorado in 1998, I took a survival course with a group that basically took us out in the middle of nowhere. It was the middle of the winter, and they took us down from a large backpack to like a small like fanny pack to basically like saying you're going to be able to not just survive but thrive with these 3 or 4 items, right? And it was like it made you think totally different because most of the time, if your car broke down or if you're stuck in the backcountry or you're hiking or something else, and you're like, you don't have all your amenities, you don't have your stuff, you're not like people get into a panic mode and that is not a place to make decisions from. Right. And so like if you know that I'm walking into those mountains and I'm not only going to survive, but I'm going to thrive with this knife and like a couple of the things, that's really all it takes to make it happen, right? And it's like there's a few things that you wish you would have had probably, but like making burn bowls, things like that are really difficult. Like with a coal, trying to make a bowl or a cup or something, it takes a while, right? Or making baskets and weaving them. Like I mean, you could do that too, but the mentality is the big part of like knowing that like you can do it, like even if you have a very little. And another example I use probably too many times in this story is that in that same course taught us like you could live 40 days without food, 4 days without water, right? 4 minutes without air, 4 seconds without hope. And so when people don't have hope, then they just start to fizzle. And so I think that when you talk about mergers and acquisitions, you talk about transitions and adversity and different things like that, you have to have a plan. But you also have to know that you have the resilience to get through it and that you can have the hope to get through it and that other people have done it too. And I think that's something that there's people that have gone through everything. Like when you talk about diabetes, like people have made it through. You've made it through. Maybe you can be an encouragement to somebody that's like feeling hopeless right now and they're just sitting down and giving up and not experiencing life and not changing things. And it's like those are the things that we need to grab onto is that there's others that have gone before us and have been in the same circumstances or worse and made it happen. And so you can too. I think it just that's part of what this is all about with regenerative inspiration is just that.
Yeah. And it's a great example for what leadership really is, because that's really seeing where it can go, even if it's difficult currently to see it, but to see where the future can go, to have that vision, to be optimistic about it, that we can go there. Maybe not always in a straight line, and maybe we have to adjust the line sometimes, but we can achieve it, and we're gonna get there. And it's leadership in so many areas in life, right? I also have 2 small kids, right? I want them to grow up with that optimism that they can really achieve in life what they want to achieve in life, right? And as an executive in a big company, it's always I tell the next level of managers, I always tell them, if you want to become a true leader, you also have to develop that view of the future that where is our strategy leading us? And then together with the team, you figure out how to get there, and you may have to adjust it. And as I said before, having a problem is not a problem. Not solving it is the problem, right? Um, so that optimism and that vision about the future, that there is a bright future and we get there, that's a big important topic for leadership, and probably every parent knows how that is with the children.
Well, and speaking about the future, let's talk about AI because I know you've been, very immersed in that. And, I think that there's a lot of jobs that certainly will be changed. Will they go away? Probably some of them will. But after you adapt, you start to find out that things will be hopefully a lot better. So talk about from your perspective, like, what you see, not just in the financial side, but across the board, like
Yeah.
of the transitions, the trends and things like that.
Yeah. So life is changing with AI, but life is always changing, right? If you think back about the Industrial Revolution, which is quite a while ago, people were afraid with machines, right? Because they said it will destroy all of the jobs, and it destroyed some of the jobs. But people who adjusted were successful, and it created different jobs, right? The same with the internet. The internet destroyed some of the jobs, especially for the middleman, but it also created other jobs. And the same is happening currently with artificial intelligence. There are some especially repetitive things. If you work in an area where there's a lot of repetitive and a lot of it is plannable, then there's a risk that you lose that job. But at the same time, a lot of opportunities open up with AI because somebody has to manage it. Somebody has to train the people on artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is not a solver for everything. Um, there are still two very big risks. One is hallucinations. It just especially for the LLMs, so for a ChatGPT or Claude or many others, they just sometimes come up with a wrong answer. It's just happening, right? So you cannot just take whatever AI gives you. A human has to look at it and do a sanity check. And it reminds me of one of the professors, actually in Austria, who told us just because it's written doesn't mean it's true, right? Whether it's printed in a book, printed in a journal, or whether it's on the internet, and now with AI, just because there's something written, you don't have to believe it. There always has to be a sanity check. Um, so there's certainly some areas where life is changing quite significantly. Marketing and sales, text production. Um, it's definitely significantly changing with AI, but there are other jobs that are coming up, and it's a big opportunity. Or in coding, coding is also one of the areas where a lot of it is changing. And that's the reason, and another reason where I always think, okay, what's really the opportunity? Obviously, there are some risks with it. And if you don't focus on the opportunities, you sometimes get overwhelmed with all of the risks. But where's the opportunity? What jobs are developing? How can I use it best to upgrade myself and get better and develop something? And by the way, there's one outcome that probably initially nobody thought about AI. Many studies show that artificial intelligence actually upgrades the performance mostly of the people who currently underperform. So for the high performers using AI, I mean, it's supercharging those high performers, but it's not changing that significantly the output. Most of the significant changes in the output, in the quality and quantity of output, is actually for the low performers. So and many studies actually show that. So it's a big opportunity, especially if you are young, you don't have that decades of experience, like maybe your coworker. AI is a big opportunity to actually upgrade your performance significantly. So there are a lot of opportunity that also comes with the threats.
Yeah, I've definitely believed that. And I think what's interesting is that I feel like the AI is taking away some of the junior jobs that, like, the internship type of scenario to the junior editor or whatever that might be in a junior position. and jumping people from here to almost like a senior position. And I think one of the things that I've seen that is a problem, and I think that people that are utilizing AI need to be very well aware of, is that you've lost the wisdom of those 5 to 10 years it might have taken you to get there. You haven't gone through as many scenarios. So keep that in mind. And like whether you're going back and asking AI in that way or looking at peers or trying to get as much advice from senior people like as possible, I think that wisdom is missing, right? So that the implementation is happening, but there could be things that they're just not quite getting, or maybe they're going to be a little bit of blood on the highway if they get there too fast without like really the stable like foundational stones they should have had, right? So that's the big thing. I'm a little bit
Yeah.
more worried about that.
Yeah. Good. It's a very good point. Also, I think what we should consider is we are currently in the hype and everything is exploding. And AI, how it's gonna turn out in the end, probably will look different than what we currently do. And I compare it very often with what happened with the internet, right? The dot-com bubble and everything that had a dot-com in the company name had just huge valuations. And the bubble burst, but the internet didn't go away, right? So it changed over the last 20 years significantly. And I think the same will happen with AI. Currently, valuations are super high. Everybody is jumping. If you have AI in your company name or wherever, everybody is jumping on it. And there will be a time where there will be a kind of a correction, but it's not going to go away like the internet. And I'm very curious how it's going to look like in the end.
Yeah, yeah. I literally saw an article this morning that said it was 90 AI companies are 90% of them are underperforming from what they were expected to do. So
Yeah,
I don't think that's far off. But
yeah.
it doesn't mean they're not performing. It just means that the hype is there. And, as you build upon that, you start to think, and it's like there's more, when you talk about agentic, like what's good, it's an agent. You're creating a new employee that is taking the role of something that might have been mundane for a human or an individual to do. And so, like, if you can take an agent to do things, they're going to work 24 hours a day. I mean, we work with it, with SAP, for example, with like large corporations and like they have all these data transfers, from, like electronic records procurement or ERP type of thing. Like it used to be that they're stuck in this legacy, like on-premise type of scenario, and now the program can really spin that so it can be done like so much faster. It used to take 18 months or so. Now you can, I can't say exactly how fast, but some people are saying within a day or two or three or four or whatever it might be, days, we'll say days. And so that's significant improvement. And that's because you've got a 24-hour a day workers that don't need coffee. They don't
Yeah.
need rest, so I think that's
I
the
get
way it
much
should be
coffee,
looked.
by the way.
Yeah, there's a coffee. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and it's gonna be in the end, it's not only us prompting all the time. As I say, the agentic AI is developing, and then there are complete work streams, and in AI. So the combination of all of them really changes the processes. But by the way, one of the things that changed quite significantly in AI when I started with AI, um, just as a company, if you used it, that was already okay. It was just cool, I'm using AI. But what I see changing is already now in late 25 and now in 2026 is you have to show some kind of return on investment, right? And it's also what I'm pushing here as the AI project leader. I don't want to see it at the end of the year and say, yeah, cool, we used it. It's really, I could reduce the external spend because a lot of the consulting work can be done by the AI, right? And there are savings that some companies report like 50%, right? Or me as the finance person, I want to reduce the forecasting process and time by 50% while increasing the accuracy between 15 and 20%, right? Those are very specific and tangible goals. And I think that's where it's going, where people say, okay, I really want to go beyond just using and really want to know what is the output of it. And coming back to the valuation topic of AI companies, I, I think this year in 2026 already companies will need to show some profits and not just activity in AI.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I agree with that 100%. Well, what else should we talk about? I think we hit a lot of different topics, but I know that there's a lot more wisdom in there with all the degrees and all the different M&As that you've done and all the different life experiences you've had. So what else should I be asking you?
I think we covered the most important topics.
Yeah, I think we did too. I do have one question for you, and this one's gonna. I gave this to the CEO of Avaya, and he gave me a certain answer. But it does have to do with AI, and the question was reversed. What in 50 years will AI need from us?
Probably not a lot, to be very honest. If it develops like that, it's probably not even 50 years. It's probably more 15 years. Um, but there are theories about the future already written long time ago where we don't work anymore and we have machines working for us. Maybe it leads to that, but if it leads to that, AI doesn't need a lot from us.
Yeah, yeah, and their answer, you'll have to look it up, I guess. But I remember at least one of the parts was that you know potentially we could work on harder things like anti-gravity or getting to Mars or doing different things that like we have more time to think, right? If we have time to think and create unique ideas that machines can solve, like that's I think something that
Yeah.
we could hang our hat
Yeah,
on.
enjoying the big world that is out there, right? One of the topics we haven't touched actually is I speak multiple languages, and I just enjoy, experiencing the big world because there is a big world out there, and working with different people and on different continents in different countries and with different cultures has been always something that I enjoyed quite a bit. And learning other languages, speaking other languages, just opens doors. And I've seen it also in M&A. It when you buy a company in South America and you go to the meeting and you start speaking Spanish, it's gonna be a different meeting. It's gonna be a different meeting.
Yeah. Or people that you meet and you've been to their country. So I've traveled a lot as well, and I love. Sometimes people say, what are your favorite countries? I'm like, hard time picking which ones are my favorite. I have favorites for different reasons, right? But
Yeah.
then they're like, well, what countries don't you like? And I'm just like, well, there's not very many I didn't like either. So
Yeah.
I think people around the world are pretty great, and I think that every culture and every geography has its own wonderful and beautiful things, and it all has circumstance to overcome as well. So it's a unique world we live in. I 100% love to travel. It's definitely a passion of mine, and so I mean, I don't know if there's suggestions or tips or places people should start. I think that's where we should get people to. I think that
Obviously, they have to start now in Salzburg, right?
yes, and actually, the first country I ever went to was Germany, and I went to Austria next. So so that was my second. So that was a long time ago. I was as an exchange student, and I can't say my German's very good anymore, but it's because it's not been used. So my Spanish isn't good. I learned a little Polish. It's not very good. So to be
Yeah.
fluent and stay fluent is a challenge when everybody around you wants to speak English, and partly because probably my Spanish.
It's very true. I think we have to go for a drink German beer and speak a little bit German. Huh?
There we go. I get better at that point, but then I might start mixing. So that's what I start doing. All of a sudden, I'm in a Spanish speaking country and I'm speaking Polish. That's where I mess up. But no, it's great. Well, I really appreciated our time today, and thank you so much for joining us. And I can't wait to meet you in person as well in Colorado here. Maybe in a couple weeks. I'll be out there in a couple weeks as well. So, all right.
Sounds
Well,
great.
hey, thanks again for joining us for Inspiration. Don't forget the algorithm doesn't necessarily like to share us around, but you can help by sharing this with your friends, your family, people that need to hear this message. and I really enjoyed our conversation today. And it hit a lot of different subjects. So I hope you enjoyed as well. And until next time, we'll see you. And be great and inspire somebody and bring hope to someone and be amazing. How about that? How's that for an ending, Michael?
Perfect.
So, thanks again.
It was great to be here.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Hold on one sec.